Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Attack on Titan episode review. This one's going to be for Season 3, Episode 10, I think it is, and this one's called Friends. And I thought this was another really strong episode of Attack on Titan. A lot happened, some kind of surprise moments, especially with what they did right at the end. I just thought an overall excellent episode because it was a interestingly structured episode in that they had a little scene at the start to kind of set things up, a kind of little scene at the end to kind of resolve that initial opening scene, the kind of shock scene right at the end. But the core, most of the episode, was Kenny talking about his backstory, basically, and then an important Levi-Kenny conversation as Kenny dies. And I thought they just did a really good job at getting across the character of Kenny in a very strong way, just as obviously he's kind of exiting the series here. So there's always been a hint at depth with him in the previous episode that like there is this connection between him and Levi, and we sort of knew what it was. This kind of clarifies all of that. It kind of clarifies how he came to be involved with the Rice family and like learn about all of this stuff. And then it just kind of solves basically all of the key things with him. How he got here, how he got here, how he got here. So from that perspective, they basically answered most of the questions with the character. And they added depth here with some of his like decision making and why he chooses to interact with certain people in certain ways. But the title of the episode, Friends, is obviously referring to his friendship with Yuri Rice, Eren has the coordinate power now. Rod Rice's daughter had it before that. The one before that, so two before Eren, he had the coordinate power. And he captured Kenny. Obviously, they were having some sort of a fight. They discovered he was an Ackerman, so initially the thought was that they have to kill him because Ackermans are immune to the coordinates power of being able to erase people's memories, so that makes them a threat. That's why they were persecuted. But here in this moment, Yuri decides to actually spare Kenny, and they go from being basically trying to kill each other to actually becoming friends over time. And Kenny is still kind of confused about how this kind of came about, how he in a way became someone's friend, and why Yuri would like let this happen. And in a way, that's sort of the trend with kind of Kenny and these key relationships with him, is that he tries to keep himself like distant from a lot of these things, but ends up kind of actually developing a closer relationship than he thought. In that, we have then the reveal, of course, of him realizing that his sister has died, but she has a son in Levi, and he specifically decides that I'm not going to let him just die like his mother did, but I'm also not going to be his father. So he just helps Levi and trains him how to fight so he can survive. And that's the key word here. He just teaches Levi how to survive. That's all. There's no real fatherly advice. But for Levi, that effectively is a father figure he never had. And while Kenny never wanted to, that's Levi's interpretation of it. And I think without kind of realizing it, Kenny sort of felt that way towards Levi as well, even though he left him the second he felt he was strong enough to survive on his own, just so he could make his own choices. And then we also get, I suppose, how he came to be a part of this anti-personnel squad, and I suppose mainly the start of his kind of I suppose why he chose that woman to be his kind of, I suppose, second in command of the anti-personnel squad. That one I didn't read too much into, just the fact that like he says that this isn't even legit. I just basically lied to get in charge of this thing. This is what we're really about, and just the idea that he ended up actually inspiring these people, not by being a military leader, but by kind of specifically saying, no, we're not going to do things that way. Follow me because of like basically our dreams, what we want to actually accomplish. So that was pretty interesting, and it all kind of like led up to the fact that like we get this confrontation at the end, Kenny and Levi, and the reveal of the Titan serum and why Kenny hasn't used it. He has enough strength left to obviously move a little bit. He could have injected himself at any point, and he's lingering over the fact of like he wants to, in a way, if he becomes a Titan, would he then understand why Yuri did what he did in like sparing him and becoming his friend and kind of opening up to him in that way. Obviously, he realizes the details that, like, what if he becomes one of these Titans that, like Rod Rice, that doesn't work properly. He'll just be a mindless Titan because it's not a fact that he's going to find a Titan shifter to eat to become human again, but it's an option for him. But he specifically chooses not to do that, and so we get the kind of last couple of scenes with Levi and Kenny, and I think the core of it really comes down to the fact of like it is Levi kind of discovering that, like, okay, so my last name is Ackerman. What were you to my mother? And it's the reveal at this moment. Like, we've sort of already knew it, but to Levi, that Kenny has always been his uncle, and so they were actually related. They were actually family, and that's why Levi asked the question. In a way, then why did you actually leave at that point? And he says it's because I was never meant to be someone's father. And I suppose part of it is that, like, Levi ended up actually kind of feeling about it that way, that Kenny may not have wanted to, but Kenny is the closest person he's kind of ever really had to a father figure. So what was he meant to happen? So it is a somewhat tragic moment, just because we have learned so much about Kenny during this episode, all of the kind of key relationships in his life, and I suppose the weakness and flaw of the character that they're not really afraid to get into here, of just kind of saying that here's someone who is completely kind of out on his own. And he specifically notes, I suppose, in his kind of last monologue, that he was a slave to so much in his life and was always around people who are kind of slaves to everything, like drink, women, power, religion, all that sort of stuff. And he realizes that kind of in a way he was kind of a slave to all of that, and he realizes that even Yuri was. And I think that was probably a hint to the fact that it is this kind of still mysterious thing of like the royal family having the coordinate power. It changes them in some way, in that we know from the past that Yuri specifically wanted to use the power to end the Titans and actually, like, basically free humanity from the walls. But he changed once he became this and just led this cult, basically, and was all for the whole erasing people's minds, to keep things the way they were, keep things peaceful, worship the walls, all of that sort of stuff. And it's this incredible mystery that we still are not particularly sure of, and that, like, they obviously know the true truth of the world, and what about that makes them be like, no, this is the way it has to be. So it's still that mystery of him realizing that, I suppose Kenny realizing in the end that, like, he was a slave to this power in a way, that he knew that he would at some point have to pass it on. They also sort of hinted at, like, the fact that Kenny was shocked that Yuri was actually, like, dying. And he seemed to accept this and almost, like, be aware of the fact that, like, just by having this power he was going to die. So I don't know if that's some reveal that we're sort of waiting for, but that was interesting in regards to just the fact that it is a power that kind of does have to be passed on. So that is an interesting one, and that, as far as we're aware, it's been passed on a lot of times. So no one with that power seems to last that long for whatever reason. So that's something interesting, at least to consider. But yeah, the death of Kenny, he hands the Titan serum to Levi and dies, and so it's just that Levi is left with this thing that he has the ability to transform himself or someone into a Titan at any point if he wants. And I think the way they were talking about it with Kenny is that basically you can save someone with this if you really want to. Now, the specifics of that, like, obviously you need a Titan shifter to make them human again, but it's this option that is now available, that if someone is dying, here is something, and you can save them if you have a Titan Shifter captive. So that's a pretty cool reveal of just like, that's clearly set up for something. I'd be very shocked to see like Levi become a Titan. We also don't really know specifically, like, because of the weird Ackerman thing and so on, can they even become Titans? So that's a kind of a one question I suppose to have. Um, but yeah, I suppose final thoughts on Kenny. I actually quite liked the character of just him having this connection to Levi, and there clearly being this rivalry, but then kind of learning that it kind of was father son as much as like he tried to not make it that way. So I really enjoyed what they did with it in this episode in terms of like, I suppose what he effectively says is that Kenny doing what he did and becoming friends with Yuri more or less ended the persecution of the Ackermans for the most part, and so the few that are left are allowed to survive and not be like hunted by the higher ups, because Yuri realized that a whole group of people is dying just because they have this power that they were just born with. That's not right. So Levi is allowed to survive. I suppose Mikasa as well. It's obviously her father was an Ackerman, obviously. So those sort of things are to me very interesting. That I think was still a case where there was still some level of like, that's interesting, but Kenny doing what he did stopped the direct hunting as such. In like Rod Rice was like, just kill him, he's an Ackerman. So that's an interesting one, and especially I suppose going to the other scenes, like at the start we saw them setting up the ceremony basically for Queen Historia, and when we cut to it we see her inducted. Everyone is excited. Everyone's accepting of her as queen. She doesn't even have to say anything because it's just common knowledge now that everyone has heard from the people of Ovro district that she was the one. This tiny girl was the one who killed a Titan bigger than the walls. She saved everyone with her own hands, her own skills, and she is our true queen, out in the open, not hidden in the shadows. And they more or less say that like she killed her father to do this, or like there's an element of like she did something that was pretty heavy and harsh to do. So they respect her now, and I like that they flashed back and showed that this was Historia's plan from the get-go. She said this to Commander Erwin, that as part of this, I have to be the one to deliver the finishing blow. And I think Erwin, he ultimately allows her to be part of the plan, even though I think ultimately didn't particularly approve of it. But with the kind of, the impression I get from his reaction was that he let her be part of the plan with the idea of like, yeah, but the chances that like that will actually happen in the middle of the fight are really low. So they set up the plan so that like, okay, everyone will go after the flying pieces of the giant colossal Titan of Rod Rice and try and take it down. And it just so happened that Historia was the one who actually was the one to finish the fight. But I think it's also Erwin just having this moment of like, I should have had faith in a way, and I like that now that she is queen, she kind of in a way got one over on Erwin, and then she goes ahead with her plan from before of she's going to punch Levi for forcing her to become queen. And I love the little conversation between the members of obviously that group of cadets, like Aaron being like, no, you don't have to do this, I thought it was just a joke. Mikasa, stop egging her on, and Mikasa just being like, when you punch him, say that you can't punch me back because I'm the queen. And Jean is like the same thing basically. And then when she powers up, basically she kind of screams. She just gives him a tiny punch in like the elbow, and she's happy about that. And everyone else is still like really like crazy because like Levi's their like commanding officer. So even though she didn't actually like punch him in the way that we perhaps thought she would punch him, they're all still like, oh, she's going to get punished. But the fact that Levi just kind of laughs and then thanks everyone, I thought that was a nice moment of just like, he's happy now. He has this squad that is so capable now, and I think part of it also is that now I suppose he has this understanding of who he is, and this uh, from Kenny, now that he knows all of that stuff, he better understands himself, and so is a little bit more open now, and that may lead into the fact that like he's now very close to everyone. Now he has this kind of power that potentially can help someone. We'll see where they go coming up, because of course the big final scene I thought was, this is the sort of thing that like Attack on Titan can do that not every other anime can do, and that is just suddenly shift the story to something that hasn't been a factor for a while and really bring it back in a heavy way. And like, it's clear we're in Shiganshina district. The armored Titan is defeated on the ground with like what looks like bullet holes in it or something like that. Berthold is getting Reiner out of the like destroyed Titan body, and there's the Beast Titan, and he's basically just like, I won, so we're actually gonna wait here for the coordinate instead of going after Annie. Obviously, Reiner and the Beast Titan had a fight to decide what their plan would be, the next part of their plan would be, and they've decided that because the Beast Titan won, they're going to wait in Shiganshina district for Eren to come, because they know that that is part of the plan, is the key, the cellar, they're going to come to him. And the reveal, obviously, of this guy, like, we saw him before, I think it was last season at some point, we saw the guy inside the Beast Titan. I don't think we know anything about him, but there's obviously something significant about him, in terms of, like, he's probably one of the more unusual Titans we've had so far. The fact that he's powerful enough to defeat Reiner, that makes him very, very interesting and important. The other factor in all of this is that, like, the age of Titan shifters is sort of hard to get a particularly great judge on, because, like, especially just because of the whole Ymir situation, like, he could have been a mindless Titan for a very long time before he ate someone to get this power, but he also could actually be fairly young, like some of our other characters. So that's an interesting one for sure. Still, like, that's clearly where we're heading to. Like I've been talking about in some of my last reviews, that's what they're setting up next. I think the preview for next episode is hinting that Eren is going to talk to someone who knew his father, who is a bystander in all of this, but seemed to be aware of some of this stuff that happened. Based on the preview, it seems like it's going to be Keith Shadis, who was the instructor for this group of cadets. I don't particularly know. Like, I'd have to watch the first episode, but like, does he say something along the lines of, like, in one of the episodes where like Eren passes his test? Does he say something about Grisha? I can't remember if that's a thing that happens or not. Like, if it's an established thing that like Keith Shadis actually knows Grisha, I can't really remember if that was a thing or not. But still, if he knows more than he's kind of letting on, that's a very interesting one, because that suddenly gives you this complete other angle on things. If he knew lots of details about Grisha Jaeger, so that's going to be interesting to see for sure. What happens in the next episode, because it could be pretty shocking, and Eren is in a good place after the successful like victory in the last fight. I don't want something to happen to turn Eren back into despair again, so I hope he handles it well, whatever comes out next time. But for sure, we're heading for the Shiganshina district. Like, Eren has the hardening power. He can seal the hole in Wall Maria. That immediately eases up the stress on humanity, because they they reclaim like half of the landmass of inside the walls with that. So I think that's obviously what we're setting up to happen next. So yeah, I think in terms of other resolution, like, did we see Hanji here? Because I know she was quote unquote like injured or like presumed dead. I can't remember watching the episode, and I'm just thinking about it now, and I don't know if we actually saw her or not, because we only saw the Cadet Corps. We've seen Levi, Erwin. I'm not sure if we saw Hanji, so maybe she's still recovering or something like that. I think they would have said it if she was dead, but we'll see how injured she is or not. But yeah, that's been my review for Attack on Titan, the episode called Friends. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode as well as what I had to say about it. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.